Hello. I'd like to start this show just by saying right from the outset, I'm going to be speculating in this show. So if you aren't interested in speculation about Prigozhin and you just want the hard facts, well, there aren't any hard facts yet. There are a lot of claims, there's some video evidence, there's some reports, and there's a lot of speculation. Now, people will often say before we have the hard facts, it's not the right time to speculate. I disagree. I think now is the perfect time to speculate. So before those of you who want to go to the comments and go, you're full of shit and talking rubbish, yes, I'm speculating. But if you're here for this ride, stick around. We'll get back to the regular programming after this one. Okay. What has happened with Prigozhin? Who knows? I mean, he has been perhaps the most high profile and entertaining character of this conflict. The Ukrainian Budanov gets a lot of press time in social media because of his dead face and slow-speaking, never-smiling approach. But Prigozhin, someone who has actually garnered a lot of support in Russia, not only from his troops, but from the population. And not only in Russia. If we look in Niger, the rallies that have been going on there since the coup, there have been people printing out on A4 pieces of paper the Wagner logo because they can't buy Wagner flags to wave with the Russian flags that they've been waving there. So Yevgeny Prigozhin is, whether you like to think of it this way or not, a high-profile character in this conflict. It should be noted too that Prigozhin has reportedly died in a plane crash once before. In 2019, he reportedly was lost in a plane crash, which turned out to not be true. That doesn't mean that this time it's not true, but it's just an interesting piece of backstory. We also learnt after the failed insurrection or coup or whatever that was, and I'll come back to that in a moment, that Prigozhin was a man of mystery and a master of disguise. We saw all the pictures of all of his wigs and photos of him in different locations in different outfits. We've had reports that one of his other Wagner compatriots on the plane worked in managing his logistics, and that part of what they would do would manage 2 flights. And there were reports that there were 2 Wagner planes, 2 jets in the air at the time that this one crashed, was destroyed, whatever happened to it. But there was a second jet. And again, I'll come back to that in a moment. But part of the reasoning for there being 2 jets was to allow some deception so that people would not know which flight Yevgeny Prigozhin was on of the 2. Now, immediately after this flight crashed, there were reports that Prigozhin was on the passenger manifest for that plane. That may well be true. But it's a point to consider that if you were taking the time to fly 2 jets to give you some ability to deceive where you may be, one might consider that you would put yourself on the passenger manifest of the other plane. Perhaps. There's also reports of video footage from the boarding reportedly showing Prigozhin getting onto the plane that crashed. I haven't seen that footage yet. Now, that's not to say that it's not circulating, but I have not seen that. I've heard it claimed, but I haven't seen that. There are a couple of things being suggested. Obviously, people who may have wanted to take Prigozhin out. Now, in the West, the number one and only candidate that's being talked about is Russian President Vladimir Putin. I'm going to come out and say right now that that could be the case. But for me, it's not the most likely case. And some of the reasons, and what's leading me to think about this, is first and foremost, this is a James Bond-style, high-profile, melodramatic way to take out someone who is a challenge or an enemy to you and to your position as president. Now, that's not to say that the that Putin didn't say, I want him gone, and whoever has arranged it has taken this approach, and this approach wasn't Putin's idea. However, I would have imagined that if Putin was going to actually command that Yevgeny be assassinated, that he would have had some say in how it was done. And destroying a jet over Moscow or the Moscow region so as to take out one of your enemies doesn't feel right. Doesn't feel, and I saw him twice, speculation, doesn't feel like the way that Putin would have addressed this. So that's one point. The other point is, whatever happened back in June, early July, with the coup, if you will, when the Wagner forces made their way towards Moscow, again, I don't ever think that that was a true coup attempt. I don't think that Yevgeny Prigozhin ever felt that he had the power, the support of the Russian people, or the support of members of the Duma to be able to actually form a coup and go up against Putin and succeed. Putin's approval ratings, from everything that we can determine, is up in the high 70s, 80%. High support. I just don't get the impression that Putin was in a weakened position, that Yevgeny Prigozhin could have come up and really usurped him, ousted him from the Kremlin and got away with it. I also don't think that Prigozhin would have done that given the timing, being in the middle of a special military operation. If he had established that coup and been successful, it then would have been on his shoulders to make things work. There would have been inside revolt, and from the Ministry of Defense, it would have been a nightmare for him to manage and most likely failed in Russian defeat, and it would have been terrible for Prigozhin. So I don't think it was a real coup. Now, I don't know exactly what it was about and what it was for, but it did provide a way to get Wagner forces rapidly out of southern Ukraine and into Belarus. Now, whether that was required to do that, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff that we don't know. But it didn't ever feel like a real coup to me. It always felt like it had some staged quality to it. And that, for me, was backed up by Putin's response. Now, had a real coup attempt been made? I mean, we look at people who are political challengers, who Western supportive political challengers to Putin. You know, they will end up, if they've done anything wrong at all, in prison for a period of time. So I would have felt that had this been considered a real threat by Putin, that he would have quite calmly arrested Prigozhin, managed the remaining Wagner forces, and dealt with it that way. And it would have been very clear from the outset that Prigozhin had attempted to attempt a coup, and he had failed, and he had betrayed the Russian people, and he was imprisoned, and he would be dealt with and sentenced. That didn't happen. There was this strange discussion, brokering of talks with Lukashenko from Belarus, and then those Wagner fighters who wished to were allowed to go to Belarus, and Prigozhin went with them. And after apparently being banished to Belarus, we learnt in the days afterwards that his private jet was flying repeatedly to St. Petersburg and to Moscow and Minsk and bouncing all around. And he wasn't in any way on home detention in Belarus. So all of these factors, in my mind, say that that wasn't a coup. And so I put that aside. I don't use that as a point to base upon what may have happened with this plane going down, that it was a retaliation for a coup. I feel like Putin was fully aware of what was happening with Prigozhin, the underlying reasons and what it achieved for Putin and Prigozhin. I don't claim to know the detail of that. And maybe in the comments, some of you have thought more through it, have got better insight. And if you agree with me that it wasn't a coup, it was done for some other reason, post a comment there to tell me what you think about that. So I put that aside. And so given that I put that aside, I don't feel that this was a retaliative strike. This was an assassination ordered by Putin on Prigozhin. Again, had it been, I think it would have been done more quietly. I don't think it would have been done over Moscow. I don't think it would have involved the needless killing of the pilots of the plane. any air steward or stewardesses who may have been on the plane. I could be wrong. Of course I could be wrong. We're in speculation land. But that's my take on it at this stage, that it wasn't Putin. Now, another possibility was air defense, mistaken air defense. There's constant talk of drones flying over Moscow, and so it's possible that some air defense system or air defense commander thought that this jet, for some reason, was going to be a drone making an attack on Moscow. But there are some problems with that too. Apparently the jet was at 30,000 feet. That's higher than any drone would be flying. Particularly these smaller drones that have been launched from Ukraine. They're crashing into apartment complexes and office towers in Moscow and exploding with small amounts of damage. No air defense system is going to be tricked into a jet at 30,000 feet being one of those. Also, there is alleged video footage of just after the plane experienced a loud bang and starting to descend, starting to fall. In the video that I've seen of that from a couple of angles, I haven't seen clear evidence or mention of air defense being suspected, of an interceptor missile being seen. No one has in that early video footage that I've seen said, we saw a missile come up from the ground and hit it, or we heard a missile and then the plane and a bang. There were contrails from the missile. That so far hasn't been reported. So I think at this stage we can rule out air defense as being a cause. Other reports that are coming out is that there may have been some gift of wine provided to Prigozhin as he was boarding the plane, and that was accepted. I don't know. Again, I've heard that Prigozhin took steps to secure his safety, that the plane was searched beforehand by dogs. I imagine these would be dogs with the capability of sniffing out explosives, and that they had obviously detected nothing, that this would happen on their planes regularly. So if that occurred, then any addition of a bomb would have needed to have occurred in the brief period between the all clear being given and Prigozhin getting onto the flight. So perhaps the bomb was already there, if there was a bomb. And talks of a bomb are arising because of what has been suggested from this video and from eyewitness reports that there was an explosion or a number of explosions. Now, the wreckage has, of course, been found. Investigators are beginning work on the wreckage. Bodies have been found. Reports are that, as you would expect from a plane crash, the damage to those bodies is severe, and that visual confirmation of who those people are is not possible, and that DNA analysis will be required. Now, DNA analysis will, you would imagine, be happening perhaps now, and that we may have results of that soon. Now, this is where I want to get into the speculation. Why would Prigozhin not have been on that plane and perhaps been on the second plane? Well, let's just say that this wasn't a known event. Let's just say that it wasn't known that there was going to be an explosion on this plane, and Prigozhin was on the second plane, reportedly in the air, out of his two jets at that time. Then you start to wonder if, okay, this was staged not by Putin or someone else, but staged by Prigozhin. Now, Prigozhin, I would feel far more likely to be someone who would say, hey, if we're going to do something like this, let's make it big. Let's make it look like someone took me out. You know, Prigozhin was the one who has the videos where he had screaming and swearing at the camera with the bodies of 70 of his Wagner fighters on the ground behind him, that famous video. He led the Wagner forces up to Rostov-on-Don and tried to capture the town in that alleged coup. Those big events like that feel to me more like something that Yevgeny would do. So if Yevgeny was for some reason looking to stage his own death and disappearance, then to me this feels like something that he might do. Send up 2 planes, get on the other plane, set the passenger manifest to indicate he's on this plane, blow up the plane. Who knows how many people were on the plane or who those people were. Again, I'm in speculation territory here, but that's a possibility. There's another possibility, of course, that this was an accident. The plane may have been not maintained well. It may be due to the Western sanctions that there were parts required for this plane that couldn't be replaced in time. They ran it a bit longer than they needed to, and there was some natural air failure. Accidents happen with planes. It's entirely possible. That may have happened. But let's just say that for some reason, Prigozhin did want to stage his death here. Why would he want to do that? Now, there's a couple of ideas going around. One is that he actually was in some trouble with the Ministry of Defence, that his contracts were all being stripped, that he was no longer going to be allowed to be able to lead a PMC. Although this is interesting because he was just 2 days ago in Africa, or 3 days ago in Africa, reportedly they're drumming up business for the Wagner PMC. But let's just say that all of that was going badly for him. He was at risk now of not being allowed to go back to Russia. And so he decided to put his hand up and say, okay, I'll go quietly. I'll take some money. I'll get out of here. Let's fake my death. I'll go and live in the Caribbean. I won't be a problem anymore. I guess it's possible. Although, as I spoke to someone yesterday, and as he said to me, that'd never happen. He said, these guys, they've got so much money. You know, they could take $1 billion and go and live on a beach, but it's not that. It's the power. It's the power that they want and they're addicted to and they really, really need. And I think Prigozhin's in that position. I don't think Prigozhin was just going to walk away and hide. So I ruled that one out. But that doesn't rule out all the reasons for why he may want to fake his death and disappearance. So let's just say that for whatever reason, he wasn't to be involved with the PMC, the Wagner PMC anymore. Maybe the Russian Ministry of Defence has decided, look, we need to cut some ties with Wagner for some reason, or at least we need to create some confusion about Wagner, who's leading them, what's happening, where they're going, so that if we do start to move them around, no one's quite sure what's going on. And we've got to take you guys out of the picture. Why would they want them out of the picture? Well, one possible reason could be that they have another job for them. Now, maybe if Wagner needs to go away, bad press, whatever it might be, maybe they want another PMC established or a similar capability. Now, Prigozhin is said to have very good connections in Africa. Perhaps Wagner in Africa isn't really what Russia wants, but Russia wants a presence there. So you might like to quietly take your tested leaders of a PMC who have run one for you in Africa and Europe and Syria, for the last 10 years, and let them quietly establish something else. Now, whether that's another private military company or exactly what that might be, I don't know. And again, this might be completely wrong. He could be dead. But now is the time to speculate on what might have happened here. The other thing that I need to which sticks in my mind, is this other plane, this second jet, which allegedly returned to Moscow after the first one had crashed and landed. And if reports are correct that I'm seeing on some social media channels, that plane then flew on to Azerbaijan, to Baku. Now, at this stage, I haven't seen any formal reporting of who was on that second plane, when they disembarked, what their comments were about the first plane crashing, any video of them reacting to that. So for me, this feels like, or in my mind I should say, I'm going to keep the door open for a while on just what has happened here. Now, Putin has come out and has spoken about this and has suggested that, yes, it is a tragedy that these lives have been lost and an investigation will be undertaken. And there's mentioned Prigozhin there because clearly it seems as though Prigozhin was indicated as being on that flight. And so that may be all as it seems on the surface. And Putin knows that Prigozhin was on the flight, an old friend of his who maybe went rogue, and he's sad to have seen him go in some respects. Or he's happy to see him go because he organised it. Or he doesn't know yet because DNA analysis hasn't been done, and he's assuming that that's what's happened. And he's making a response because it would seem weird to make no response to this major news item. The next few days will be interesting to see what kind of response we do get around an official reporting on this. If we see funeral, if we see activity from Prigozhin's family being reported. Now, I heard that Prigozhin's wife was apparently continuing on with her planned trip to India, I believe it was, which allegedly she has had scheduled. I can't corroborate this. So it'll be interesting to see if we look around, not exactly at where Prigozhin was, because we can't now, but those factors and events that occur around him, in the circles where he was and where he should have been, to see what happens there. So in my mind, I'm going to keep the door open on this one a little bit, just particularly remembering that this isn't the first time that he has reportedly died in a plane crash and then come back from that. And I don't think it's of any great embarrassment to Putin or Prigozhin if in a month, 3 months, 6 months, Yevgeny turns up again, if this deception has served some purpose for the special military operation that Russia is conducting in Ukraine. What that purpose is, I'm not privy to, but I'm not ruling out that there may be an ulterior motive and a purpose which has led to Prigozhin faking his death. Let's see.